You see this little hole right here? That rust got in there and it just festered and festered, and it didn't get fixed and it didn't get fixed, and it just kept getting put off until it caused all this amount of damage. So it ate into here and it went all the way over to the left side. So not taking care of your problems in the start is going to give you a lot more work in the end. My name is David Welch. Today I'm at Brothers Tech Center to show you how to fix this. And I know you're thinking to yourself, damn, that looks ugly and damn, it's going to be hard. No, it's not. You stay tuned. I'll show you how. Now they actually sell this entire patch panel, but I don't think I'm going to need that much. I've assessed the damage pretty much, and it's always worse than what you think, but I believe I'm going to be able to get away with this patch panel here. Now this one has this raised intention right here. This is for the deluxe mirror, so I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone, getting my rust repair taken care of and upgrading it to the deluxe mirror on the inside. On the outside, they've got this entire patch panel that's already made and ready to rock and roll. So the patch panels these days, the quality is just off the charts. The chances of you finding a truck that is still in good shape and cutting it all up and using the patch panels on that like I used to have to do, forget about it. The time, the trouble, the money, it ain't worth it. The new patch panels are just going to be easier to work with, and you're going to get your job done a lot sooner. Let me get set up a little bit here and I'll show you what we're going to do first. First, what I want to do is remove this whole panel right here. Then I'll be able to get a good look from the top side and see how much damage is going up onto here. Now, when I'm taking this off, what I want to do is, you'll notice the seam in the back right here. So I'm going to cut just to this side of the seam. I'm going to continue this cut along here, and then I'll go up the front right here. So I want to cut it close enough to this edge so that the small amount of metal is easier to remove, but I don't want to cut so close that I have to worry about doing any damage to any supports underneath. So I'll be able to take this all off in one shot. Then I can just gently remove this leftover metal, and I don't have to worry about doing any other damage anywhere. So let me get my cutting wheel and I'll show you how to cut this out without doing any damage. So when I'm cutting this out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my cutting wheel, and I want to have the black side facing out. I don't want to have all this here because when it's spinning it makes it more difficult to see things. When I'm cutting, I'm not taking the blade and burying it all the way in deep. I'm just cutting the thickness of the metal, okay? Because I don't want it down deep because I might do damage to braces underneath. So it goes a little something like this. My roof is all ready to come off here, so I know that a lot of you guys like to wear gloves. I do not like to wear gloves. I would recommend that you do, because if you don't do this on a regular basis, your hands won't be tough enough for it. But you can see the rust that's going on in there, and it looks like we had a little rat making a home too. With the mask cut off, now I'm going to gently take off all of the metal that's left over. Sometimes you'll get lucky and it's so rusted out on the spot welds that it'll just come off like this. Some of this came off that way, but the rest of this isn't. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a spot weld cutter. Now you'll see the jagged teeth on this here that do the cutting, and then you'll see this pin here with a point. Now technically speaking, that point right there, you should be able to put that in the low spot of your spot weld and go ahead and cut it off. But a lot of times what happens is this pin just doesn't hold on, and this does a lot of walking around on you. So what I like to do is get a little 1/8 inch drill bit and then just find the center of each individual little spot weld and drill out just a little bit, maybe through the first piece of metal. You definitely don't want to drill through the second piece of metal because I don't want to have to weld any of this stuff up. Now sometimes it's difficult to find your spot welds, so just get a wire wheel and go ahead and clean it up, and it'll generally make them easier to find. When you're taking this off, you can use some pliers, you can use screwdrivers, whatever. What you don't want to do is go like this and bend down, because we don't want to do any damage to the rain gutter. We don't want to do any extra work for us. So I'm going to go ahead and take off all this metal nice and ginger-like so we don't do any damage to anything underneath. I'll clean it up a little bit and I'll be back in 2 minutes. Now that I've got all my remnants removed, I can go ahead and grind down all of the little spot weld remnants that are left over. Then what I want to do is get a wire wheel and get all the loose scale of the rust off. We don't want any flaky kind of things on there. You want to leave a little bit of rust on there though, because we're going to use this right here. Now you don't have to use this specific brand, but you want to use something like it. This is what's known as a rust converter. So when you shoot this on there, what it does is it actually takes the rust and it turns it black. That'll turn black in a little while, and it converts it to iron or something like that, and now it's actually paintable and it won't rust. I'm going to do all of this, paint the whole thing with the rust remover. I'm going to let it dry overnight, and then I'm actually going to paint it with a glossy colored paint. Doesn't make any difference what color, but I like to use glossy. If you use matted finishes, it kind of has that rough texture, and the rough texture will harbor moisture, which will start the rust repair all over again. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this all up, and we will see you tomorrow, man. My rust mort has dried up, and now I can get a good look at what I got going on here. Now normally I'd just like to use the smallest amount of patch panel I can get away with to do a repair. I don't want to use the entire thing if I don't have to. Unfortunately in this case the rust is all the way across, and I'm going to have to use the entire thing. A couple of things that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with just yet is this brace right here. If you look on this patch panel right here, you'll see how this sticks up on this edge right here and on the bottom edge. So when I'm installing this, it's going to be tough to get those in. I don't know if I'm going to have to cut these braces out. I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of do some exploratory kind of cutting in the front up in here and see what I can get away with. I'll put this up in there a few different times and see how it's fitting and things like that. I'll get this to fit really well before I do any major cutting. I'm going to show you a little bit more of that in a bit. Some other things we'll be taking care of at the same time here is we got some rust going up in here. I don't know if you can get that on the camera. I've already done some repairs here. They do not sell this patch panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make patch panels from scratch with the same repair on the other side. So let me get a few things together, spin this thing around, and I'll show you how to do it from scratch. When I'm looking at a repair like this, first I want to see where my healthy metal is. We can see that this is all pitted right here, and that's not rusted all the way through necessarily. So I want to test it by getting something pokey and just seeing if it's going to stand that or not, and it does not. It pokes through in several different places. So I'm going to need to do a patch panel for this and for this right here. Now this has got a bunch of 90-degree bends in it, so doing a bunch of 90 degrees on one piece of metal is a bit much. What I'll do is I'll just simply make this first piece, do the 90-degree on it, grind it down nice and even, then I'll go ahead and take care of my other section right here. So let me cut this out and get a piece set up, and I'll show you what it looks like. So whenever I do patch panels and I've got leftovers, I always save them. Now this is actually a piece off of a 73 to 87 hood that got damaged, so I just cut off the piece that had a nice 90-degree angle on it right here. And I'm just going to cut a little bit larger than I need, just kind of set it up in here, get my planning going, and then I'll trim it down until I get it to fit nice. When you get things like this edge right here, it's really difficult to be able to cut something and have it exactly fit here and have the cut right here exactly. So don't even try to do that. Just leave it a little bit longer. Then when I get this piece in here, I'll simply grind down the very last edge so that it's absolutely perfect here, and that's just going to be an easier way to do it. So let me get that going a little bit and I'll be right back. So I got lucky with this guy right here, but let's say for instance you don't have old patch panels to cut up like this. In order to achieve a 90 degrees, you could simply put it in a vise and hammer it down. Another thing that I do is I get the really thick angle iron, about 2 feet long or so, bolt it down, and then you can go ahead and put the metal in there and bend the end down also. So you can find relatively inexpensive small brakes to buy to do 90-degree bends with too. So you got a lot of different options to be able to make your little patch panels that you need. This guy's ready to go in. I'm going to go ahead and weld that in, and then I'll show you how I take care of the rest. Now when you order your patch panels, you want to make sure that you order your patch panel clamps at the same time. Real simple thing. This little bride goes right into there, and then you just screw it down and it clamps it on just like this. Okay. All right, good deal. So one of the reasons I don't like to wear gloves is because I need to feel the metal. I want to feel that it's nice and flush and everything. When you're doing this, you just want to get tack welds every few inches. We got to make sure we don't build up a lot of heat or the metal's going to warp. So you just have to weld a little bit, wait a little bit, grind a little bit, weld a little bit, and take your time with it so that you don't do any extra damage. I'm going to go get this welded in a little bit more so it's nice and secure. I've got the edge right here and the edge right here to verify my line across. I'll go ahead and grind that down, and then I'll see what I'm going to do there. So it's cut, trim, cut, trim, cut, trim until everything fits nicely. And all I have to do is just set this in here. And now when I'm going to be welding on this edge, that'll give me a 90 degrees. I'm going to be welding on the inside, so hopefully I won't have to do any grinding down here, maybe a little, but not much. It's very difficult to weld upside down in corners, so this is going to be a lot easier way to take care of that. I wasn't able to recreate this little hump coming all the way down here, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal because there's still a channel here in the rain gutter, so I went ahead and cleaned that up and shot some rust mort in there also before I put this piece here on, and so we'll still be able to get drainage down there if we need it. So I'm just going to go ahead and weld this in. I'll keep welding. Remember, heat is your enemy, so it's weld a little bit, wait a little bit, grind a little bit, weld a little bit, on and on and on and on. I've got this all done. Everything's welded up. It's nice and secure. Since it's on the inside, nobody's going to see it. I don't even have to bother grinding down the welds on the inside, and that'll make them stronger too. Now that's done, I can turn my attention to the inside here, and I'm just gonna cut some of it away and just kind of see what's going on. I don't want to cut too much away, and I'll just see what I'm kind of getting into, and then I'll analyze it and see what's up. So stick around and we'll find out what's up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll be cutting up underneath the lip right here. and then I'll go up a couple of inches here. I'll do it on both sides. I'm going to leave it still attached in the center so things don't get too loosey-goosey and floppy on me while I'm doing a little bit of exploratory surgery here. So you see this hump that's right here? I was kind of worried about how easy that's going to be able to get into this corner or not. I was worried that I was going to have to take these supports off, but it doesn't look like I'm going to have to. I was able to get enough of the metal out there. It came out nice and easy. So when I put this in, I should just be able to put it like this and then just go ahead and slide it on up. Now I have to decide where to cut this. So on this patch panel, you'll notice that it has these slots in it right here, and that's if you had the headliner option. They just popped into these holes right here. We don't have that, plus welding it right here, getting your patch panel clamps on it, is going to be a bit tough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this lip off right here, and I'm going to go down about 1/2 inch. I need that because I need to have some place for my clamp to be able to hold on to. So when it's on the edge right here, I need to be able to clamp this guy, and I need to be able to clamp up right here. Now when I cut these out, I'm not going to try to cut this out exactly and have it perfect and it's going to go up there the first time. It's just not going to happen. What I'll do is I'll take this one, and I want a 1/2 inch gap right here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut about a 3/4 inch gap, and I'll take that along the side, and then this one here, I'm just going to go right at this lip. Then I'll trial fit up everything in there and get it to fit nice, and then when both pieces are up there, I'll cut both pieces, and then I'll know I have a perfect cut all the way across, and I won't have any large gaps or anything. I'm also going to be taking off this leftover metal that's right here. It's just like when we did the top. You cut off your mass and then you gently take all this off right here. So give me a minute and I'll be back. Taking this trim off is really slow because this piece right here is a bit weak, and I got to be really careful so I don't do any damage to this. They don't have this available just yet. So one of the things I wanted to show you though is when you're buying your trucks, make sure you check them out really thorough, because whoever had this last time, they just took Bondo and just stuffed it up into the holes, and this big old chunk just fell out. Not a proper repair at all. They did not subscribe to the channel, I think. So I've trial fitted this up in here about 3 or 4 times, and I've trimmed it down a little bit more, One of the main kickers is getting into this corner right here. So what I've done is I've grinded this down right in this little corner just a little bit. That's pretty common stuff. And now we can see if it fits up in here, but that's going to be your main kicker there, is trying to get it up into the corners. When you're going to be doing things like that, grinding a little bit off both sides, don't get too carried away. A lot of times you'll be like, oh, 1/8 inch, it's not enough, 1/8 inch, it's not enough. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch off, and then you're taking too much. So just piece by piece, small increments. My patch panel is in, and now I'm going to start welding things up. The first thing that I'm going to weld up, or that I'm going to work on, is this lip right here. I need to make sure that this is correct. If I was to cut this and weld this and the patch panel was a little bit off, and then I tried to do this, it's going to make it real difficult. So this has to be done first in order to have the patch panel in the right spot. Then you can cut this and do all the welding up there. Now you can see here that this has quite a bit of pitting rust on it. That's not going to be seen because the rubber covers this. I'm using the patch panel in the back here, and that's going to give me the support that this weak piece doesn't have. They don't make this piece right now, or at least we can't get it right now, and this is actually in okay shape. I've shot rust mort on the back side of this when I cleaned it all up, so the rust is going to be arrested. It's going to stop, but we are going to have to do a little bit extra welding, give us a little bit extra strength. Now normally what I do on these here is a rosette weld, where I drill through the first piece of metal, halfway into the second piece of metal, then I'll get a weld started on the second piece of metal, and then I'll work my way out and cover up the weld. But I want a little bit stronger weld on this because this lip is so weak, so I'm going to drill a hole all the way through, just in a few spots. The rest of the places I can rosette weld, but this is going to take just a little bit extra attention when it's in this kind of shape. But again, the rubber will cover this, and our patch panel's giving us extra strength, and we shot the rust mort on there, so we're going to be okay. My front is all secured up. So now I can go ahead and I can cut both these pieces at the same time. When I'm doing that, I have to watch out for this right here. I want to make sure we don't damage that. So when I cut it, I got to cut right to the edge of this because I have to have enough room for my patch panel clamps to go here too. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this right here on the inside to show me where to cut it. Then I'll get on the outside and I'll cut it and follow it on down, get my patch panel clamps, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so here you can see where I've got my cut. There's no way I would have been able to see that from the top here, so we had to go from the bottom and make sure it was cut in the right spot. Now it's going to be easier to cut this from the top, so I'll be able to cut this out the rest of the way. I think probably what I'm going to do though is get a magic marker and go ahead and mark exactly where I'm going to be cutting. It'll make it so that my line's nice and straight. So I'm going to cut all this up and I'll be back in 2 minutes. When I tried to draw the line out, I'm usually pretty good at drawing lines, but it was a bit more difficult, got all crooked and stuff. So using tape like you saw me do, that gives you a nice cleaner line. It's still relatively difficult to cut a nice clean line. And when you have overlapping metal like that, when you're cutting, and especially if it's curved, if you were to take the blade for instance and come at it like this, then when you cut the two pieces you'd have a pretty big gap. So you got to make sure when you're cutting that, you're coming at it about like this. You don't want to come straight down either. You pretty much want to hit the metal in a 90-degree section so you don't get a really wide gap when you're doing there. Now even if you cut as nice and careful as you can, I still have areas where it's a little bit thinner and it's a little bit thicker. Now when I first put the clamps on, the gap was pretty wide, and that's because these two pieces are kind of sprung out like this. So all I had to do is just put the clamps on, kind of get them a little bit tight, and then I went ahead and hammered down like this and tightened them up a little bit more, and then that closed in my gaps. But you can see here, this is pretty narrow, that's pretty narrow, but I got some wide ones here. This is getting pretty wide up here, so I'll have to weld this in a special way that I'll show you. Now when you get large patch panels like this, like say you were doing a door panel repair, when you're doing something like this, you don't want to weld on the outside and work your way in, because if it wasn't uniform all the way across, now you've locked in your edges, and if this is bowed up or bowed down, you're going to be stuck. So what you got to do is you got to weld from the center and then work your way out. Then if there's any irregularities in shape or anything like that, that irregularity will work its way to the outside edge and you'll be able to fix that versus being stuck in the center. So I'm going to get me some tack welds on here. Again, heat kills your weld, so to speak. It warps up the metal, and now you've got more metal work to do. So we want to keep our heat down. So we're only going to be hitting a tack weld here, about 4 inches of tack weld, the tack weld, the tack weld, the tack weld. We'll go back and we'll do it again. You got to let the metal cool down. Every time the metal gets hot and then it cools down, it shrinks. So I'm going to show you a couple of different things to do when that happens. Now, when you get a big gap like this right here, when you weld it, what you're going to do is it's going to be difficult to just hit the welder and go zzz and weld it. It'll probably cause the weld to be too hot and the weld will just splash down on the ground. So what you're going to do is you're just going to hit a gentle little weld, a quick little zot, and you're going to make a little BB up there. You zot it again, you get that BB to a relatively decent size. Then you can hit the welder a little bit longer, zzz, and you can melt that BB down into that gap. So it takes a little bit of practice, but you can do it. Okay, so you can see how I built that BB up there. Now it's melded in. After I get enough welds on there to make it nice and secure, I can go ahead and take out my patch panel clamps. And you can see that if you did not have the roof removed, there'd really be no way to install these and take them back out again. So I just don't see a way of doing this repair really if you're not going to be taking off the roof. I suppose you could, but it would not be easy. When you get all of these off, then you got to double check and make sure that the metal hasn't warped up on you any, or maybe when you got it off. So you have to double check and feel with your fingers. Another reason why I don't like wearing gloves. And you generally have to do a little bit of hammering and dollying on stuff. I forgot my dolly today, and my body hammers for that matter, but a dolly's basically just like an anvil that's portable, so to speak. You just need a nice chunky metal piece to work against on the other side. So if I am going to be trying to bend a piece of metal, then I'd have the dolly here and I'd be hammering off to the side. That's hammering off dolly. That's how you bend the metal. If you're going to be trying to straighten the metal, generally that's going to be on dolly, or if you're trying to expand the metal, that's going to be an on dolly hit. When you hit the metal, it brings it out. When you weld the metal, it shrinks in. So sometimes what you have to do in a large patch like this is the welds are going to shrink you in a little bit, so you might want to get a hammer and dolly, and you just simply put the dolly underneath the weld and you hammer right on the little spot weld. And that's just going to expand that little bit and it'll compensate for what shrank. You don't have to do every single one every single time. You just kind of watch the metal. You got to keep your fingers on it. Just because the patch panel's on there, just because you've already done a bunch of welding, doesn't mean the metal's just going to stay there. You have to constantly keep your fingers on it, constantly feel it, and as soon as you find anything off, go ahead and fix it, because after you do your welding, then it's a lot more difficult. So once I get all my patch panels out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double check everything, and then I will grind these welds down just a little bit on the outside and on the inside. Now on the inside here, or the top maybe, as the case may be. I don't really need to grind it all that much because nobody's going to see this. It doesn't matter. I will need to grind it on the inside though, of course, to make sure that everything's nice and smooth. And if I just welded this entire thing and then I just had to grind the entire thing, well then I'm building up a lot more heat and it's giving me more problems. It might warp the metal and such. So we're just going to be taking our time, a little bit of welding, a little bit of sanding, a little bit of welding, a little bit of sanding, giving the metal time to cool down in between. This is going to take me a little bit. So we will see you in a little bit, but make sure you stay tuned because I got a lot more stuff coming, man. Now, another reason that we are going to be grinding after we do a little bit of welding is that it cleans up any slag that might be on here that might upset your weld, so it cleans out the weld at the same time. Plus, if your metal's a little bit off, it'll shine that up because your high spot will get grinded off first, and it'll show your low spots and high spots good. Then after you find them, you can run your fingers on them a little bit, little hammer and dolly just to make sure everything's nice and straight. So just constantly be feeling, constantly be grinding it down, and constantly using the hammer and dolly to make sure everything's perfect. So almost done. My welding is all done, and again, I don't have to grind down every single one of these because nobody's going to be able to see it, and it'll make the weld a little bit stronger. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and paint it. Before I paint it, what I'm going to do is use some of this right here. Now you don't have to specifically use this, but what I'm going to be doing is shooting this in nooks and crannies and along these seams here, along these seams here, in order to make sure that there's no holes that we can seal up, and if maybe when I was welding there might have been a pinhole leak or something like that. So this will seal all that up. Then what I'm going to do is go ahead and paint it, the entire thing. I'm going to be paying attention to my nooks and crannies in here and things like that. After I get that all done, then I'll go ahead and put my noise suppression pad up on top here, glue it on. Then we'll be ready to put the roof on, and then we'll go driving. So stay tuned. Now you can get expensive Dynamat kind of stuff and put it up here. We just use tar paper that we use for sound deadening on the gas tanks. It's basically exactly the same thing. I just used regular old spray-on glue. What I do is I spray on the top of the roof here, and then I'll spray on the bottom of this pad, and then it'll stick a lot better. If you just spray one thing or the other, a lot of times they don't stick that well. So spray both surfaces and then stick it down. Put something on there to weigh it down so that it sticks on good. Wait a little bit, and then we're ready to put the roof on. Now putting the roof on, you got a lot of different ways of doing it. They have special glue that is specifically made to glue patch panels together. Now technically speaking, I could put it all the way around and I could glue the roof on. I really don't like to do that. I only like to use the glue sparingly. I really like to weld things on. And the main kicker is this right here. So you don't have any way of doing any welds on this once the roof is on. So what you could do is just use the glue in this back corner here, put it on, then go ahead and clamp it down the rest of the way when you know it's in the right spot, and then you can go ahead and weld it on. I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit here. Now what I like to do on these is I don't like to use the glue. I like to, even if I'm not doing the roof, I don't like this seam right here. I just go ahead and weld it up regardless if I'm working on the roof or not, because I don't like to have to block sand everything and come back and sand this one little line out, because if you don't sand it out each time, it gets filled in and it'll smooth over. Then 6 months, 2 years later, your paint job will crack along there. So if you just weld that up, you'll just get rid of that problem altogether, and it'll give you a little bit cleaner, smoother look. So you've got a couple of different options on how you're going to put it on. I'm going to go ahead and get this on. I'm going to go ahead and grind this edge down a little bit right here. I'll grind the edge right here on the roof where I'm going to be welding it. Then I'll go ahead and I'll put it on, and I'll trial fit it around a little bit. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to do any cutting or trimming or anything, but sometimes you might have to do a little bit. Maybe you'll find out that your lip right here is dipped down or something like that. When you were working, you might have knocked something around. So putting the roof on a couple of different times is natural whenever you're doing anything like this. So give me a couple of minutes and we'll see what it looks like, huh? All right, there's a little tab right here. I guess when they're manufacturing, they probably hang it from that, and that needs to come off. You're just going to grind it nice and smooth here, cut it off nice and smooth before I put that on. So let me get that off of there. Yeah, see how nice that fits? Just basically right off the bat. Yeah, so that's good to go. So the roof pretty much just pops right on. I'm gonna need to work this corner here a little bit. I just need to tuck it into the notch there a little bit. So you can't just hammer on it, so I'm just gonna get this chisel here and work it in. Now, when the metal's not welded in, a lot of times you hammer it, it'll just kind of bounce back out. I'm just getting to get a couple of hammers so I can sneak it in that corner a little bit better. And then, again, it's just pushing back out on me. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start up here where it's nice and even, and I'm just gonna get some tack welds and get this more secure. Then I'll go ahead and just keep working my way down. I'll use my hammer here to push it in even, get some tack welds. After the tack welds are far enough, then this will be secure enough to when I hammer on it, it won't bounce back on me. So let me get that fixed. Now, technically speaking, I should not have welded it on the edge here first, but the roof is fitting so nice, it didn't really bother me. I just kind of wanted to do that real quick and show you. But again, normally when you're doing something like this, you want to start from the center and work your way out, because if this was bowed up or down and you locked in your edges and you work towards the middle, then you'd be stuck with that bow or whatever. But if you work from your center, any irregularities will go ahead and go to the outside edge and it'll be easier to fix. So what I'll do now is I'll just do tack welds all the way up across here and to the back. Now what you definitely have to do is finish the back first. If you were to weld your front and had it all locked in, and then you came back here and found out you had some 1/4 inch gap or something, it'd be a little bit late to fix it and be a little bit hard. So make sure you got this all set up, then we can get that all set up. Now my back is tack welded all the way down, and I know that it's totally secure and it's not going to go anywhere. I haven't finished off the welds because there's a lot of welding. It's going to build a lot of heat, so I can get it all nice tacked in firm. Then I can work the front a little bit, then I can go back and forth so I don't generate too much heat in one spot. So now I'm going to go ahead and start doing my rosette welds in the front here, and let me show you what that looks like. Again, we're going to be starting in the center, working our way out, and I've got some clamps going here. I should have brought more clamps and went all the way around, but this is all I got for right now. So when we're doing this, we want to make sure that our metal is flat as possible against each other. We don't want any gaps. So we've got our clamp on here, and then just to be on the safe side, we're going to take something like this and then hammer that down just to double check everything, and it's looking good. We're gonna get a drill bit with, I don't know, this is maybe like a 1/4 to about a 3/8. And what you're gonna be doing is you wanna drill I wanna drill through the first piece of metal, and I really want to drill about halfway through the second piece of metal. If I go all the way through, it's not that big of a deal. I can just hit the weld on the bottom, but it's a bit drag to weld all the way across and grind all the way across on the bottom. So try not to punch through if you can. So now when I've got my drill done, then on my second piece of metal, I'm going to get a weld started in that second piece of metal. I'll just go zot, zot. I'll get that little BB going. Then I'll melt that BB down. Now I know my second piece of metal has got a good weld in it. Then I can go ahead and just fill in the hole, and I know that weld's going to hold. Now they do have these welders that you can just do the clamp on and do the spot welds. And they're like a couple $100. It's not that expensive. I probably ought to have one, but I've already got a welder. This is the way I normally do it. And this is going to give you a better weld than the clamp style anyway. So this is what I do, but if you have the other tool or you want to spend the other $200, that's an option for you. All my welding is done. Now, one of the things that you got to be careful of before you start welding is you have to make sure that this right here is clamped down properly. If this had a hump in it that was a little bit too high and you welded all this up, then you're going to be stuck when you get right here. So you really got to make sure that this is clamped down and the metal is as close as possible before you do that. Now I can go ahead and I can grind off my welds. Now this is a hard wheel right here, a hard wheel versus a flap wheel. And the hard wheel is really good for getting into these nooks and crannies. And I can just get right up on top of the weld and I can just really gently just grind that down. So it's pretty easy with this one. When I'm doing grinding on the rear here though, I'll be using a flap wheel. And what you have to be careful of here is because it is on a corner, you have to make sure that you're grinding off just the weld and not your patch panel or not your cab. So just be careful when you're welding on that. Now the last thing is how are we going to seal this up the rest of the way? So you can use the soft seal kind of stuff that you put in there from the factory. I don't personally like to do that because when I'm building these to the level that I do and I'm color sanding and polishing, I always tend to hit that goop that's in here. So what I like to do is I'll make sure that I don't have any sharp edges. You want to make sure that they're pushed down and grinded down a little bit because a harsh edge will show up more readily when you fill it in with Bondo, because that's all I'm going to do is I just put a really thin layer of Bondo after I prep this all out. Now yes, Bondo is going to crack sooner or later, but so does the goop that they put in the channels here too. And the Bondo is just going to give me a nicer, cleaner look. You got other things you can do to these things, cutting off the edges and all kinds of things like that, but this one's going to be more of a resto mod, going more of a clean, classic look. So we're going to be leaving all of this. Maybe I'll do a video for you on some of that other stuff later, but you all remember, my name is David Welch. I am at Brothers Tech Center every single Tuesday, making sure your truck gets back on the road, teaching you how to work on it and making sure you're safe. You make sure you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, whatever else they've invented by now, and subscribe to the YouTube channel because, I don't know, I didn't like that last one, but anyway.